will hold similar talks with his British counterpart later today and will head to Rome tomorrow for more discussions. Tony Sabine, TVB News.
Dominic Strauss-Kahn, the former International Monetary Fund chief, who was once tipped as France's next president, goes on trial today over pimping allegations. Strauss-Kahn, whose high-flying career ended amid accusations of sexually assaulting a hotel maid in New York 4 years ago, is to be tried in his home country on charges of aggravated pimping. If convicted, he faces up to 10 years in prison and a €1.5 million fine. His lawyers say that he had attended libertine gatherings but did not know that some women there were paid sex workers. In France, it is not against the law to pay for sex, but it is illegal to solicit or to run a prostitution business. The Communications Authority has slapped a $200,000 fine on Asia Television for failing to pay its license fees. It has also warned it will consider revoking the broadcaster's license if ATV fails again to comply with the authority's directions to settle the outstanding fees together with interest. Meanwhile, the Labor Tribunal today began hearing the first batch of claims brought against ATV by some former employees who were not paid their wages. Liz Yoon reports.
The Communications Authority released a statement today saying ATV failed to pay its license fees by the deadline stipulated in the relevant regulations. Since the broadcaster has failed to pay its license fees twice within 3 years, the authority decided to impose a $200,000 fine. It has also rejected ATV's request to pay its outstanding license fees by 5 installments, starting from March 31st and ending on November 30th. The authority stated that the broadcaster has to settle the outstanding fees together with the interest incurred in 2 installments by February 18th and March 18th. It warned that if ATV fails to comply with the directions, it will face more serious sanctions, including the possibility of having its licenses revoked. Meanwhile, the Labor Tribunal has begun hearing 12 cases of outstanding wages involving former ATV employees. 9 of them reached out-of-court settlement with the TV station before the hearing began. And ATV has agreed to pay them their overdue salaries by February 15th. The remaining 3 cases heard today involved a producer who asked the broadcaster to pay the court costs. The demand was rejected by ATV, but in the end, the judge ruled in favor of the producer. Another case heard today involved a former reporter who had sued the station for unpaid wages, anchoring fee, severance pay, and payment in lieu notice, totaling around $100,000. A confidential agreement was signed between the ex-reporter and ATV in the end. The broadcaster will pay the employee around $54,000 and $3,000 in court costs. The former reporter said afterwards that she hopes ATV could pay staff members their outstanding wages by mid-February as promised. If the company fails to do so, the staff could be forced to seek liquidation for the company.
After the deadline, it's not only the matter of 1 people. It will affect about 700 people. The staff will lose their job immediately.
Up until now, a total of 88 former ATV staff members have taken a broadcaster to court for failing to settle outstanding wages and payments in lieu of notice, among other types of payments. Ip Kapo, executive director of ATV, is confident that employees would get their January salary without stating when. The station may be selling land to interested buyers, Ip says. Although the deadline for putting in bids for a stake in TVB was over, he said some people are still showing interest to invest in the station. Liz Yun, TVB News.
Chief Executive Lan Cheng-ying says it could be difficult for his government to abolish functional constituencies in the 2020 Legislative Council elections. He also said in deciding the election method for the 2017 CE poll, Hong Kong must choose between Beijing's framework or keep the one used in 2012. Stephanie Choi reports.
The government will need the support of 2/3 of the legislature to make the 2017 chief executive election by 1 person, 1 vote possible. Civic Party lawmaker Ronnie Tong had earlier suggested that he would pocket the SAR government's political reform proposal if the central government agrees to abolish functional constituency seats in the 2020 Legislative Council election and lower the nominating threshold for the CE election in 2022. But he admits even this suggestion looks a distant possibility.
I never underestimated the difficulties of convincing Beijing to promise to abolish all functional constituencies. However, we must realize that we are in a political difficulty in the sense that nobody can see any way out of the present deadlock.
The chief executive today ruled out Tong's proposal, saying this isn't something that the government can promise. Lun Chenying also commented on the 2017 CE election, saying it will either be designed according to the National People's Congress Standing Committee's framework for political reform in Hong Kong or according to the CE election method used in 2012. And Chief Secretary for Administration Carrie Lam pointed out it would be a lose-lose situation if the government's political reform package isn't passed by LegCo. She added it would be difficult to gauge whether the next political reform proposal would be a better one if there is another round at all. The Democratic Party maintained it would not accept the NPCSC's framework. Chairwoman Emily Lau said society should now focus on how the government can give the people of Hong Kong a genuine choice in electing their chief executive in 2017. Meanwhile, Deputy Director of the Basic Law Committee, Elsie Lung, wrote in a newspaper article that trying to get the central government to declare the abolition of functional constituency seats in the 2020 LegCo election is just as unrealistic as rejecting the NPCSC's framework. Stephanie Choi, TVB News.
And still ahead in our newscast, a proposal to extend the Nongping 360 cable car system to Taiyou. In Hungary, a protest against the government's pro-Russia policy. And carnival time in Venice.